Cool, I'll get back to it. So, hey, I'm there again. I'm Seoli. Most people in here probably, if you know me, it's likely for my audio work on Beyond Skyrim Elsweyr, the music I do there. But I've also picked up level design, and today I'm going to talk about that. I'm mainly doing that for Morrowind, and I will walk through 2 Morrowind dungeons, both work in progress, to show you how certain things work. We're going to be talking about what I've called technical level design. I don't know if technical level design is an actual term used in the industry. If it is, then I've probably butchered it now. What I mean by it, though, is we're going to be looking at lighting, navmeshing, and optimization. Primary focus is on lighting, because I heard that a lot of people have interest in that. So I'll be talking about how it works, how you can use it, and just showing you a few examples of what you can do with it. One more thing before we begin. If my audio starts crackling, let me know and I can reset the stream. And if you have a question, make sure to ping me, because I tend to miss stuff. And in the first stream I did, I missed like half the questions because of that. So, yes, with that said, I assume you can all see the screen share just fine. Haven't heard any complaints yet.
Looks good. Gray creation kit screen.
It is gray, yeah. So this
Cool.
is it. This is my stream. We're done. Let me load the thing up. First, for those of you who are not familiar with level design, lighting, and all that stuff, I will show you the basics of what lights actually do. So I've just copied, I think it's a Riverwood interior, I believe. Just copy this over. Just a nice little interior with no lights. Basically, again, for those of you who are new, lights are separated from actual candles and stuff into objects. So here we have a nice little candle light. It's just a light object that you can place on a light to make it emit light and give a little bit of an illusion of that. Now, there's many things you could do with this. First of all, you can change the width or the radius of the light. You can change the brightness. The shortcuts for these, by the way, are you can hold S and left click and then drag, and you can do the same thing with Control Alt S to I just saved the plugin. Hold on. to change the brightness. There's a couple of types of lights. So we have these ones. These are omnidirectional lights. As you can see, they just light up in every direction. It's just a sphere of light that extends and retracts depending on how you set it. We also have shadow casters, which is the same, but they cast shadows. So we can move this somewhere. You can see it dynamically casts shadows depending on where you are. These ones have an extra shortcut. You can hold Alt B and then move it, and you can change the depth bias. So if I increase this, place it nicely. If you, for example, look at the edge of that table, you can see kind of how the shadows start fading in on different distances. And down here, you can also see how it can kind of mess up if you don't do this right. So you can tweak that setting to kind of, tweak how your shadows can start on edges. I like to go somewhere in the middle usually, so about there looks kind of nice. Besides this, we also have spotlights. Let me see if I can find one. This is apparently a spot. Spotlights are very similar, but instead of going in every direction, they go only in a spot, as the name implies. So you can aim these at specific things, like I want to at that corner there, I can kind of aim it only at that corner and then make that really bright if I wanted to. Also, a fun thing about the brightness in the CK, there's not really a limit, so you can kind of deep fry anything, which is very fun for nice little screenshots. I just saved it again. Oops. For some reason, saving this plugin takes forever, I'm not sure why. Either way, that's how those work. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So with a combination of all those lights, there's one more type, but that's hardly ever used, so I'm not going to cover that. With a combination of all those lights, you can practically light up any area, and there's lights come in all kinds of different colors and different feels. So for example, we have on Morrowind, I'm using the Morrowind lights right now, we have this default candle light here, which is a nice little, nice warm little light. We also have a warmer version of this with a bit more orange in it. It's like quite a lot more orange. We also have an extreme version of this, which is even more orange, or supposed to be. Apparently it's not. and they can change color to one's purple. There's blue lights in this, even though this looks more reddish to me. So for example, lights that are near water, they tend to have like a bit more blue colors to enhance that feeling. We'll cover that as well. So that's kind of how the basics work. One more thing to note here is that there is a limit. It's quite an old engine we're dealing with here. So what I'm going to do is get a bunch of lights. Now what you'll notice is these lines around it that I can toggle on and off. Those are the boundaries of your lights, so the reach. So you can see that right now it's touching several things, touching that wall, that cabinet there, the barrels and the floor. The reason it's important to keep that up is because there's a limit on the amount of lights that can touch an object. If I have the side of this house and there's more than 4 lights touching it, you'll end up having lights popping in and out of view and disabling themselves as you look at them, because the engine simply cannot handle more than 4 lights touching a single object. So you want to make sure you keep that in mind. Another thing to keep in mind is that with Shadowcasters, you can only have 4 of these per cell. I believe it was 4. So you really only want to use these for things like chandeliers and like fires and other more grand things. Other things you should just be using normal objects that don't really cast shadows. If you use them properly, nicely, you can kind of hide the fact that this light is shining straight through a table. If you kind of move it up a little bit, you can mask that. So a way you can check if your lighting is getting messed up is by going to File, Preferences, bringing up Shaders, and then hitting Amount of Lights. Currently you can see it is all green, which is good. Green is a good color. If I add more lights, so I'll turn this on again. You can see it's still only clear, it's only blue, it's not too bad. And as I keep adding these, the color changes until it eventually gets a bit too dangerous. And there you go, we got red assets. Which basically means that now if I go in game, it's not going to be stable. Certain of those lights will disappear at times and it's going to look weird. Also, you should never use this many lights this close together. This is why the brightness scaling and the range is a thing. But yeah, that's something to watch out for. Generally only use lights where you have to, especially Shadowcasters, use them very scarcely and tactically, basically. Now that we've talked about that, there's 2 more things that come with lighting. It's image spaces and lighting templates. Image spaces are essentially, you could see them as post-processing, and light templates have a lot to do with ambient color and such. So we're going to go in-game. Just give me 1 second to launch this. I'll give you a brief walkthrough of a few rooms. What the fuck was that? Someone just crashed behind me. I have a few rooms in a work-in-progress dungeon for Morrowind. This is a first pass, which basically means that I've done an initial design on this. I've done all the cluttering, all the NPCs, the navmesh and the lighting, the placement and everything. And then someone else is going to... Look at all those people. Nice. Someone else is going to review that and do another pass and tweak things, change things wherever necessary. So, now that we're here, I will kill all the enemies for our convenience. Yes, welcome to Ostanger Barrow. Again, this needs a lot of tweaking. This is a first pass. To give you a bit of a feel of the dungeon, I'm just going to walk through it a little bit. We're dealing with a pretty unique place with a lot of verticality. The collapsed hallways, a lot of water, very heavily damaged hallways like this. Immediately you can see some of the lighting in effect. I'm using blue lights underwater combined with green colors to make it a little more scenic and to add a bit more, I don't know, colorful depth to the whole place. Again, here is also a very subtle light source. You don't need to put lights on actual objects that would produce light. You can use them very subtly in ambient places as well, like that. So here you'll notice this room looks a bit weird, maybe the lighting is a bit dark. That's because of the image space, and I'll get to that in a minute. I'm just gonna walk through a bit further. The reason this dungeon, the lighting feels a little different is because we have this combination of fire and water, and I've tweaked my image space and my effects to kind of match that vibe. Because I had the lighting, I needed it to look good both above and under the water, because there's a lot of underwater sections here, such as this one. So in a minute, we'll get to a room where I'm going to be showcasing the difference between image spaces and lighting templates and kind of how it impacts stuff. Again, here's a fine example of bad optimization that water kind of it's fake water. That's because of room bounds, which we'll get to at the very end. So here's our room. We have two light sources. We have a little light in the corner here with some smoke, and we have a candle light here. And what I'm gonna do, first of all, just take this room in a little bit, take in the surroundings, kind of get used to what it feels like. And then I'm gonna load into this. I don't know if I have the underscore. I did. So I'm not gonna move my frame. This is the same cell, same lighting, same image space, same lighting template. And now I'm gonna turn off the image space. So again, the image space, we'll get to them, to tweaking them in a minute. I'll show you actually what they all include, but it's mainly, you can see it as post-processing. There's HDR, there's color tweaking, there's color appliance, there's contrast, depth of field, some bloom, some white levels. We'll get to that in a minute, but it's very good for filtering stuff and for adding a stronger atmosphere, which is especially useful for dungeons. And they're actually also one of the main components in exterior weathers as well. So image spaces are used everywhere. They're extremely powerful, and for example, the reason why the ice caves and the Falmer dungeons feel so cold is because of the image space. Very cold colors applied, a lot of blur, a lot of depth of field, which just makes it a very strong atmosphere. And I can demonstrate how much it does by turning it off. So we'll go in here, take a look at this image, see the colors, see the ambience, the smoke, and then keep it in mind while we see this. Completely different. It's all plain, it's all gray, boring, dull. Yeah, it just removes a lot of the atmosphere from the place. And to me, at least, significantly, oh, that's nice, reduces the impact this whole thing has. We can go back to the previous one and show you the main room we first had. Again, very nice optimization here. We'll go in here. You can see, so here's the first room again. Arguably a bit too dark, but again, this is a first pass. So take this in, and then we're gonna go to the no image space cell. Everything once again looks plain and dull. A lot more bright as well, which in a dungeon generally isn't really what you're looking for. And you can see this room is very flat in color, kind of tasteless in my opinion. So in a minute I'll show you the image space I was working with here. It's a custom one. I'll kind of talk about how things work. That is image space. So I'm going to go back to the comparison cell and then tweak a lighting template. So this is a custom image space and custom lighting template. And basically the lighting templates don't do much with post-processing, but they do more with ambient color, directional lighting, and especially with fog. So you can change when, what distance your fog levels start occurring, for close and far. You can individually tweak those colors of the fog as well. This is why certain dungeons in the game are very dark, because the ambient fog is actually a darker color. This is why in Markarth interiors everything feels a bit more golden, because they're using a lighting template specifically designed for Markarth. So we will use one of those Markarth ones, and immediately you'll notice it's a lot more golden and bright and a bit warmer. Especially here you can see how if I turn around, it's lit up. It's bright. The Markarth interiors have this really interesting thing where the directional lighting is very sideways and very gold, and yeah, it kind of fits the whole Dwemer aesthetic, I guess. So later on I'll show you another, actually I can go there right now, I think. Yeah, I can. Let's do that. We're now going to go to the boss room. Oh, I can't type Ostanger Barrow 02. This is the boss room of this place. Very, very large and imposing room. You can see that the lighting here is focused on these pillars and the whole imposing thing. This looks pretty cool and intimidating, and if we then go to the same cell with no image space and no lighting template, we get something extremely dull that pales in comparison. It really does not feel the same to me. This has a much stronger tone, a much stronger atmosphere. And that's just by applying a customized image space and lighting template as well. You can't really see the fog taking effect here because there's a lot of smoke that I've placed in here. But the ambient color is also slightly tweaked, and that plays a role in that. So now let's have a look at the actual image spaces and lighting templates. I'm mainly going to focus on image spaces because lighting templates, you have a lot of examples in vanilla that do this very well for you, and the image spaces are a bit more vague. Let's see which one I gotta load up for this. Let's load the comparison one. So, welcome to the absolute clusterfuck that is this cell. Again, this is the first pass. A lot of stuff is pretty poorly designed here. It's my fault in learning. Either way, we're looking at the lighting here. Let me save. So, first of all, if you open your cell edit window, you'll notice that you have your lighting here. You have a lighting template. This is what I mentioned, all the fog colors. There's general ambient color, directional lighting, which is what that Markarth interior used, where one side was lit up and the other was not. And here we have the fog colors. You can change their distances. You can change the power of it. You can change the colors. Also some cool options to show the sky. If you want to do like a cave where there's like light coming into the ceiling, you can have an option to show the sky, which in this case I have used. You can see the sky up there. You'll notice this is a very dirty look, and that's the image space. So we're going to get to that now. So they can be found in special effect in your object window and then in image space. So I will search on Stanger. Here we are. So this is all the options you have. It's actually not that much. I think I got a question. Can you adjust image space across a region? No, it is per cell. I've been talking to people about switching image space using a trigger box so that when you walk over a certain thing, it will change the image space over time. I'm not sure if that's doable. I bet with a little bit of scripting magic that might be a thing. Oh, according to Dronon, it is. Good. That's awesome. So I guess it is doable per region, but I think the transition is the hard part. Yeah, exactly. It doesn't look great. So you'd have to get someone to write a script that would, I don't know, tweak all the values over time, which for the RGB is going to be quite an issue. Either way, yeah, so a lot of this stuff is for exteriors up here. So eye depth speed and all this stuff is mainly for exteriors. It's basically, I think what this is that if you look at the sun, then look down, your lighting automatically adjusts. It's like in real life when you look at something really bright and then go into a dark room, your eyes take some time to adjust and they get better at seeing in the dark, and vice versa. I think that's what that does. It doesn't really matter much in here. Bloom, I can show you this. Actually, the better way of showcasing this is by going to the boss room, because this has much more defined lighting. So if we, what a fucking mess. If we go in here, hide that door, little shortcut. You could press 1 twice to hide stuff. It's very, very nice. We'll go in here, hide that trigger box, activate the image space. So this is what it looks like. And if we then go into our image space, I will actually make a duplicate of this because I don't want to fuck this up. Duplicate, rename it to AToMM. Yes. I'll quickly set this cell to use set image space. AToMM apply. Yes. So I can change this. If I heavily increase the bloom threshold, does it not update live? I think I might have to reload the cell. Hold on. No, don't save that. I think I might have to reload because I tweaked it as I was looking at it. So give me 1 second. There we go. I hope it did it now. And this is now active. I have lost my object window. There it is. So, for example, we can change saturation amounts. You can see it very much becomes quite like a Doom game, I guess. Also quite fun to see this without any or with very little saturation, a bit closer to the version of this dungeon that doesn't have the image space that I showed you. So just by tweaking these values, for example here, if we tweak this to one, very different feel. You can use these in extremes in like Oblivion Realms and other really scary and unique places. But in this case, it's a lot more calm. One of the other powerful things is the white level here. You can change this to all kinds of things to reduce the brightness overall a little bit. It's a bit of a risky setting, but you can absolutely use it. Bloom scale is another fun one to mess around with. You can see you can make things quite extreme. You put that up to like that, and then the radius very high. This is stuff that can very easily be messed up, so you want to be careful with it, but it is also very powerful when used correctly. And again, this image space isn't perfect. I still need to tweak things here, but it is custom and it does give it a little bit more of an extra vibe. So next time you're making a little level, you could think about messing around with this. Just make a duplicate of like a vanilla image space that comes close to what you want, and then just start fucking around with the ambient color. Actually, it's not an ambient color, it's more like a filter that gets applied and everything. And just start messing around with these settings and just find something that works for you. Again, brightness and contrasts. These three, saturation, brightness, contrast, are the ones I use the most. I just find them very useful. Depth of field is the blur when looking at a certain object close by. It's quite calm in this one, but you'll find if I use another image space in here, for example, I think the Falmer ones are very, very strong with this. See, there's a lot of depth of field, a lot of blur, very heavy stuff. If we use the ice cave image space, you get much more colder colors. So it's a very strong thing for atmosphere. Like, I'm not changing anything, I'm just switching image space. That's such a huge impact. So that's fantastic. You can use that all the time. Farmer IS also helps make the regions feel sickly. Exactly. So it's very useful to just go through vanilla image spaces and kind of look at how they've done it and figure out for yourself why certain things feel certain ways. And often you'll find it's not even that complicated. Lighting templates, I've kind of already covered. But it's just fog color. Honestly, I recommend just jump in game. Make like a really large interior so you can see the fog colors in distance. Start tweaking the colors and just mess around, and you'll come across all kinds of cool things you can do with this. They go hand in hand, these three things: lighting objects and the image spaces and lighting templates. So just mess around, and don't be afraid to look up tutorials, and on the wiki there's a lot of information on the lights as well. But yeah, now that we had the stuff of how you can place and use these things, we're going to go back in game. I'm going to talk about usage of lighting, because in this dungeon I've done a couple of things that gameplay wise and mechanically serve some purposes as well. So let me just load this up again. Where do we start? Let's go with the boss room. So, if we have a look at what we're dealing with here, this section is basically a normal hallway. Well, I say normal, it is a very vertically collapsed thing again, which we'll talk about in a minute actually with navmeshing. It's quite an interesting thing to navmesh vertical sections. Lighting here, relatively normal, just some candles and stuff. And then when we go down here, it feels very different. So this looks pretty cool in my opinion. And one of the reasons it works is, first of all, as I said, it looks cool, but two, it actually serves a purpose. I've not put any lights along the sides, except for that little skylight there, but it's not even that bright compared to this. Because this, essentially, when you place a light somewhere, it attracts attention. And you can use this for gameplay and for, like, more of like a game design perspective. If you want the player to go somewhere, you can put like a colorful light there. Or if I want the player to go around a certain corner, I could put one of those light beams there and then guide them in there. In this case, I've lit up this central pathway, the pillars along the sides, the ceiling. and then the entire wall back there is lit up to kind of show you like, hey, this is where you're meant to be going. There's going to be something there. And when combining that with the entry into the room, you get this sense of, oh, there's going to be something big here. You walk through, and lo and behold, the boss fight triggers. Except I already killed him because I used God mode. But with lighting placement like that, you can guide people in certain directions. And also you can use the contrast with light and darkness to keep them away from certain areas. For example, nobody is going to look back here. So you can hide like a little treasure back here. I haven't done that in this case because this place isn't finished yet, but you could do that. Another little example of guidance here is you've killed the boss. You fight this guy who's now kind of just chilling in his little tomb. Are you good? I love doing this. You've killed the boss, you're done, and immediately you notice this light inlet, which again I need to tweak, which then leads you out of the dungeon. Here's another example. Again, here we have fairly basic lighting, just using the candles on the walls. And here's another one of those highlight things. You can use lighting to guide people in certain directions, but you can also use it to highlight certain pieces, set pieces or objects, or in this case, it's the treasure room. It's the only light in the room besides the exit, which is also a thing you need to highlight. So just by placing that simple light, it's immediately clear what that is. It's like, oh, that's an important thing. And hey, look, it's a treasure thing with some cool stuff. And also, this is a fun little thing in general, not really lighting related, but just level design. I really like with big things like boss fights or big quests, I like to see my results afterwards. So in this case, I can look down, see the boss lying on the floor, and I'm like, oh, I did that, that's cool. Just a little level design tip in general. Use verticality like this to oversee the entire area you've just cleared. Just a fun little tip. So besides leading people in directions and highlighting stuff, it's generally, it kind of speaks for itself, to be fair, but let me get down here. I kind of mentioned it earlier, but just the contrast with color and scale and size, you can instantly tell what's going to happen, sort of. So this is a normal hallway, as I described, and then here, it feels like a boss room. Like, not just because the room is bigger, obviously, but the lighting is a lot more focused, and the colors are a bit darker, a bit more imposing. There's a lot more effects, a lot more smoke. This looks, I guess, more treacherous. So just using the difference in color and intensity of lighting, you can make a lot of difference in how a place feels. So throughout your dungeon, you could use increasingly more daunting lighting, to get the feel of, hey, I'm really going into some dangerous place. Yeah. Oh, yeah, one other little trick I guess you could consider is when you're entering a dungeon, what you kind of want is that right away the player knows what they're going to be dealing with. I've kind of done this in the first cell. Oh, that's not correct. So the whole focus of this dungeon is that it's a collapsed place with a lot of cave-ins, a lot of water coming in from the ocean, and immediately when you enter the first water section, you get this blue light inlet. Not really realistic, but that is very much the visual vibe of the whole dungeon. And just by doing that at the very start, you're setting a tone, you're setting a certain expectation within the player, and you can fulfill that expectation and build upon that. So generally, it's a really cool idea to have some kind of set piece or some kind of way of introducing the lighting tone of your dungeon at the start, because it creates an expectation that you can use. I think I've touched most of my stuff on lighting now, I believe. So we're gonna head out. We're gonna move on to the next aspect, which is Navmesh. So gonna head back in here and load up our Navmesh cell. Navmeshing, for those of you who don't know, it is basically something that allows you to tell NPCs where they can walk and how they should walk. So if I turn this off, first of all, I'm going to teach you a lot of shortcuts. Navmeshing is absolutely pointless if you're not using the shortcuts because it is a pain. So press Ctrl E to bring this up. You get this cool little window. I'll briefly explain what some of the most important buttons do. Again, I'm doing this for those of you who are new to this. You can notice that I can select these triangles, I can select the edges, and I can select the little things. These buttons take care of that. So if I select all of them, I can select triangles, edges, and these, but there's shortcuts for them. We'll get to that in a minute. Other things are views. You know what? I'll get right to the fucking shortcuts, whatever. The only buttons you want to be using are these three, and I'll cover those at the end. So, for selecting triangles, use T. For selecting edges, use G. And for selecting vertices, use V. The reason you want to be doing these shortcuts is because you're going to be moving around your render window a lot, and when you do that, this thing gets unfocused and it's lost behind there, and it's annoying having to adapt your render window size to get the thing on there and then move your mouse back and forth. If you learn the shortcuts, it's going to save you hours of work in the end, so it's absolutely worth it. Generally, with using software like this, I recommend just learn the shortcuts. It's fucking great. Besides this, another one I like to use is W. You can use it to only view your Navmesh or do like a mixture, so I can see my Navmesh through the entire thing. Extremely useful for when doing pathfinding testing, which I'll get to in a second. And another one, actually there's another few other ones we'll get to in a minute. Right now I'm going to show you what this does and how you can do it. So I'm going to bring this up here. We'll talk about this in a minute. NPCs without this stuff can't do anything, and when you have it in place, they can walk to certain areas. They can walk around that table all the way through there, they can walk from there all the way to there, etc. You need to put this kind of marking system in, because you need to define the terrain and how the terrain goes and what is safe to walk on and what is not. So we're going to be doing this here. So just give me 1 second to hide some of these annoying things that are going to get in our way if we're not careful. Again, using 1 as a shortcut to hide all that stuff. Bring up Ctrl E, Navmesh menu. So generally what you want to do is, if you want to Navmesh a room like this one, you need to make triangles. So obviously you need 3 vertices. If you hold Control, you can create multiple at a time. Just right click and it makes a vertex. There you have it. You can see it's floating above, and there's a good reason for that. There's a nice shortcut in the creation kit to hide water. Shift W. I've noticed this doesn't actually hide it, it's just a visual thing. So the collision is still there. So when you're Navmeshing and you have water, make sure you actually select it and hide it with the 1 shortcut, because that removes the collision as well. So now that we have that, oh god. Again, I'm going to use my shortcuts to select only the vertices, or vertice. What you can do typically is create a vertex and then select the other ones and hit A to connect them. But what I like to do is a bit of a speedy version. You can just hold Control and make a new vertex and it will automatically connect them. And this way you can very quickly make a bunch of Navmesh. Now I've completely fucked this up, so give me a minute. This can get awkward after a while, because you'll end up in situations like these where I want to Navmesh in this direction but I haven't got this selected. So it'll end up overlapping like this, which you absolutely do not want. So, solution for this, there's a really nice little shortcut here. Tab, you can switch between the pair you've got selected. So if I want to go in that direction, I can just do that. If I want to go back, I can do this. It's a very basic shortcut, but it's going to save you a lot of time. So basically what you want to do is simply outline your assets in a way that will let you nice and cleanly mark the area for the NPC to walk. An important thing to note is that at the end you're going to be marking the edges of this, so the NPCs knows kind of where it has to stop walking. If you put this too close to an asset, they might get stuck on things, because again, it's fucking Skyrim, it's not exactly high-tech. So you want to make sure that you don't get too close to things. Another cool shortcut I just did, F, it's a general creation kit one. You can move things down. It works with these things as well. So if you accidentally put something up too high like this, you can just drop it down with F. It's fucking fantastic. So that's very basic stuff. I'm going to keep Navmeshing this for a minute because I want to show you something else. So again, we can do it very quickly with that S feature. doing it a bit dirty at the moment because there's another cool thing you can do. If you turn off vertex select and use edge select using G, you can actually press S to switch the vertices that your edge is aligned with. So in certain cases, if you end up with things, like for example this, I hope I can recreate it. Oh, that's absolutely fucked. Here you can see that tab thing in place. I need to switch it. You don't want to have stuff like this because this is going to be a mess to work with. So what you could then do is hit G and switch that edge. In this case, it's not a very great switch, but you can change how the triangle is formed, which in certain cases can really help you with optimizing your Navmesh. So besides that, there's something more advanced that you want to be working with. I've just gone the wrong order. Let me go back to the pathfinding. I've showed it earlier. This is one of the buttons you want to be using. This is the test Navmesh button. So if you press this, you get a cool little window. What you want to do is go to 22. That's the default human width. And now what we end up getting is an overlay of where NPCs will be able to walk. And if you right click twice, you'll actually be able to test where they can walk. So this way, if you're not sure if someone can move through that tight corridor, you can just test, and look, they can. And if it's not possible, it'll stop, turn yellow, and it will tell you that you can't move through there. You have to make it wider or change the angle or whatever. But this is just a way of testing if it actually works. You don't have to see there, it doesn't work because certain things got deleted. So that's what you would see. If it doesn't work, the line just kind of stops and it marks your, or what would have been your endpoint. I missed some questions. When making Navmesh, do you have to do anything special to allow NPCs to use doors? No. Doors are automatic. Doors, loading doors use door markers. So you'll see it here. Did I not put it? Is there no door marker there? That's curious. Oh, because I duplicated this cell, all the door markers got deleted. Well, usually the doors have a door marker, and then the finalized Navmesh below it, the triangle actually turns green, and that will indicate that NPCs can then use that. Does Creation Kit not have a tool? It does have auto-gen for Navmesh, but it's absolutely horrific. Don't ever use it. Maybe for exteriors you could use it, but for interiors like this, there's no point. Just do it manually. It's honestly quicker than fixing auto-gen. Sky Oblivion is currently working on their own custom generation tool, which I've heard is a lot better. So that's something to watch out for. Maybe they'll eventually release that, at least to us, maybe to the public. Sounds really cool. Now we're going to move on to some other shortcuts that are useful. This is obviously a lot of water, this dungeon's underwater sections, and you have to mark the fact that it's going to be underwater. You do that with water Navmesh. So you'll see that the Navmesh here is all turned blue instead of red. What you can do is on a triangle, it's only got to be the triangle, not the edge or the vertex, it's the actual thing. Press O, and it will turn it into a water Navmesh, which will tell the NPC, like, hey, I'm currently, I don't have to walk on this, I can swim above it, and you can, in this case, mark the corridor, and they'll swim through that corridor above this Navmesh. Another one of those types of Navmesh is preferred pathing. This is used in exteriors, mainly in cities and towns. You can hit a triangle and press P, and it will turn orange, and that's going to be a preferred path. So you can put this on roads, which will mean that then the NPCs will use that instead of going straight to their destination, walking through fields and whatever. They'll actually prioritize roads. Now we're going to move to something a bit more advanced. Well, it's not really advanced, it's just fucking annoying. We're dealing with jump markers. So here we have a really cool looking vertical hallway that drops you straight down. This is an issue for Navmesh because if you can't walk on such a steep slope, just putting Navmesh diagonally on that is not going to work. So that would mean that followers wouldn't work in this dungeon, or NPCs or enemies, and you do want them to be able to work, especially followers. People like to use them, so it has to be compatible. So there is a solution for this, and it's called jump markers. You can see them here. You can have individual Navmesh islands. Again, here some of them got deleted. For some reason, I'm not sure why. But you can connect them. Well, they're not really connected, but you can have an NPC switch from Navmesh plane to another by using a jump marker. The concept is super simple. Getting these to work is not. It's an absolute pain in the ass, but with a lot of fine tuning and tweaking, you can get this done. So you have to make sure that if you use verticality like this, that you design it in such a way that there's like platforms to jump on. So in this case, the hallway got slightly angled. There's like a rubble piece here that conveniently can be very much used to land on without taking fall damage, and then you can put a tiny Navmesh plane to then jump from to the next one. You cannot use jump markers from normal Navmesh to water Navmesh. I've tried this, it doesn't work, unfortunately, so you have to do it with normal Navmesh. The way you do this, if we go back to our little empty or non-Navmesh room, I will quickly Navmesh this table. You'd never Navmesh a fucking table, but for the sake of demonstration, we'll just do this. I got ping. If you use water type Navmesh, is undefined behavior if there is no water to shallow water. I don't know, to be honest. I think that if they can, like, if an NPC enters water, they automatically trigger the animation for it, I believe, and their mode for swimming. So I think if it's very shallow water and you use water Navmesh, I think it will still walk. But the second they'll be submerged, they'll trigger their swimming animation. And I guess then it just kind of adapts. I don't know. You just mark the bottom of the sea floor, for example. And then it just knows where the bottom is and what the terrain and the height is. That seems to be all it needs to know. And it looks strange having NPC use. It's only a jump down, and they play an animation. It's actually used in vanilla. If you remember the Dragonborn DLC, you clear that first Temple of Mirax cell with Freya. There's a section where she sidetracks to a treasure room and she actually jumps over a ledge. That is using a jump marker. That's the exact same thing I just showed you. So the way you do this, you need to have edge select enabled. So again, disable your vertex select and go on G. Select these two edges and then just press P, and it'll create those markers. And you want to make sure that these are aligned nicely. So in this particular case, just align them there. Make sure the angles are sort of the same. Again, this is far too close for a jump marker. You don't need this here. I bet you could just connect this through normal Navmesh and it would still work. But for larger ledges like we've seen back there, you need these because it's not going to work otherwise. Same thing here. You could see that here my Navmesh wasn't working because there's another little transition to water here. A tiny little jump here to make that work. Again, the markers are gone because I had to update the cell. But yeah, jump markers are a pain to work with. They need a lot of trial and error to figure out. But once you got the hang of it, you can pretty much design anything as long as you keep it in mind and allow them to jump to platforms. Because again, if this distance is too long, the NPC will just fucking die. So I mean, you want to make sure that you can actually use these. But yeah, they're pretty cool tools. Then once you've done all your Navmesh edits, you've done all your Navmesh, you cannot just, close it. You need to. What's going on here? My Navmesh is not happy. Boom. Yes. Okay. What you want to do is you want to open the window, hit this. This is find cover edges. What this does is it marks the edge of each Navmesh thing and tells the NPC where the Navmesh stops, basically. Hit that, and then hit finalize. And this is what generates the jump marker. This is what generates green triangles on the door markers. This basically actually puts it in the game, for all I understand. So whenever you're done, press these two buttons. And of course, don't forget to test your Navmesh with the test tool. That said, we are now done with Navmeshing. How would you handle blind drops into deep water then? You have one at the bottom of deep water. I don't know, actually. I haven't tried that. You could probably trick it into thinking that there is normal Navmesh there, I reckon. But yeah, I'm not sure how stable that would be. I guess that's just one of those trial and error things. You have to just try and see if it works. I think it might not, but it's worth a shot, to be fair. You actually want to check triangle index. I've never even been shown this. And now my window won't open anymore, which is fun.
If you want me to explain it, so if you go to your Navmesh thing up there, file, edit, view, world Navmesh.
It's not really closing my Navmesh window anymore. Hold on, let me refresh this. So
it's not on the Navmesh window. If you actually go on the main menu up the top there, where it goes like file, edit, view, world Navmesh.
hold on, I'm refreshing. Hold on,
oh, okay.
It's fucking Ellie.
Yeah, I know. It's a pain.
It's not really doing much. I think I might have to restart. Yeah, it's not refreshing. We're gonna have to restart. I'll do it right now. View Navmesh triangle index. Where is it? Did I miss it? Is this what you mean?
Down the very bottom. No, down the very bottom. Select triangle or index. Like that. And then
it crashed.
Make sure, okay. What you do with that is you select triangle by index, and then you got to go check for warnings. And the reason why you do that is because certain triangles that you have in place may be issues.
Yeah,
and so you
I remember this.
That, and once there's no issues, then you draw your cover, and then you finalize your Navmesh.
I remember this. I had to do this for this dungeon actually. Yeah, that is a very useful tip, especially when using these crazy jump markers and all these really weird vertical things. That's going to help you. It's not always accurate. I've noticed certain things it counted as errors weren't actually a problem, but again, it is a useful tip and useful thing to utilize. I'm just going to wait for this to load, and then we're going to look at optimization. Optimization section is quite short. I'm going to use a different dungeon for this. This is a current claim of mine, which is basically really old level design from years ago. We don't even know who made it. And it's a very massive cave room, which uses pretty poorly placed or poorly optimized assets. So I just need to wait because my CK is being slow. You gotta love this. It's the pain of working with Ellie. I'm sure this is all much better on SC, but for Morrowind, we do not yet have that luxury. So now that we're here, I'm gonna load into this place. Just give it a second. It's a very, very large place. Hide the water, hide the markers. So, again, as I said, it's a huge, huge place. Far too big even for the purpose it serves, but that's that aside. You can see it's just a big cave room, basically. And they've built this using individual pieces. This is what we call kit bashing, creating new shapes using multiple pieces kind of clipped into each other. Very common technique. I think you can use it everywhere. For example, a nice little example of that is here. This isn't mine. This is the original level design of this. It's a very nice kit bash for the front of the ship. Just using a skull in the distance that actually looks like an actual dragon skull on the boat. Really quite cool. But we're here for optimization. Here's a cool little example. So we have this little thing here, right? That asset is covering that edge so that you can then be immersed in the cave. But if you take a look, it's actually a gigantic cliff piece that is only being used for about 20% of its full size. Problem is, this is still being loaded. All these polys and all these textures and stuff, it's still being loaded. It takes up memory, it takes up power, and it's just a waste. And again, there's like entire cliffs in here to cover tiny gaps. The same thing goes for here. No, not there, sorry. There's one back here. Tiny gap uses an entire cliff. This is not really the way to do this because, again, this is done all over the dungeon, or this room at least. And it's going to add a lot of extra stuff to load in, which is just, for some people with weaker PCs, it's going to ruin performance, so you really don't want to be doing this. A way you can fix this is using the scale tool. So any object in the CK can be scaled using S and then just dragging. And this is not just for making things look bigger or smaller. You can use it extremely well for stuff like this, for making walls out of separate pieces like this, because I don't even need that asset there if I just take this thing here, move it a little bit, and just make it slightly larger, and the gap is covered. Very brief, raw. I'm sure there's a gap somewhere, but I've just saved using that asset. Same thing here. We have this rock place your thing, which is using an entirely fully 3D modeled 360 thing. None of this is being used. I can simply delete it and just take that piece and scale these up, scale it a little bit, and we're done, and the gap is covered. So when you're using kit bashing like this to make a room or anything like this, make sure you just use the scale tool, because not only does it allow you to use less assets to do the same thing, it also reduces the texture density, which we'll get to in a minute. Generally, you want to be using as few assets as possible because it saves power, really. Again, just huge cliffs and entire things. Ceiling is made out of fully 3D rendered rocks on every edge. Not really necessary. Yeah, so then we're on to texture density. For this, we're going to move back to... give me 1 second. I'll barrow. I'm going to use the main cell here. Here we are. So, we're talking about this here. This is a fucking mess of kit bashing. This is not very well done. Prime example of how you should not be doing it. You got this tiny little gap here as water's coming through it. And I've used 3 gargantuan walls that are barely visible. Don't do this. Very inefficient. This also looks quite inefficient. You have a lot of rocks. Again, it's not bad making walls and caves out of individual pieces like this, not using tile sets, because you can do custom shapes like this that you wouldn't be able to do any other way. But it is using a lot of unused stuff. This rock here, for example, is only being loaded partially. It covers quite a bit given its size, but yeah, the back isn't being used. The reason this still gives me a solid frame rate is because on every single rock I've increased the texture density. If you scale something up, the texture has to stretch, and it's given more screen space to load. Alternatively, if you make it very tiny, it has to load the exact same amount of things on it in a much smaller space, which makes it harder to render in. So by having all these rocks and slightly upscaling them all, you are reducing the performance load. It's still going to be quite heavy, something like this, but just upscaling it like that is going to make a difference. And that can be combined with the biggest of them all. If we turn on our markers, we can go to View, Show Height window, and you can enable portals and rooms. I'm not going to talk on how you place these in, not that much, but just on what they do. That's not what I wanted to do. Nice. This is basically, they're called room bounds, and what these things are, you can mark or can divide an interior in several sections, and if I'm in this room, it's not going to load anything that's within these 2 boxes, basically. There's a lot of assets here, a lot of stuff here, but it's not going to be loaded at all when I'm in here. Sort of. We'll get to that in a minute. So this is why this can actually work, is because when I'm in this pretty inefficiently designed section, optimization-wise, this isn't active. Neither is this. So that's a great way of saving memory, and you can actually design your dungeons this way. The reason this hallway is done like that is because then I'm not seeing anything back here, so I can easily put a connection point here, a portal we call it, to connect these two, so that I can seamlessly transition from one to the other. You do this with portals, as I just said. Basically, give me a minute. You can select these. This works with sightlines, so if I look through this from this angle, it's going to load everything in my view. And if I look only here, that stuff isn't being loaded. And if I look at that hallway, this is unloaded all at once. So that way, it just connects the 2 rooms, basically. You can see that there's arrows going that way and that way. And that allows you to completely deload things that aren't on your screen. Very, very common technique used in games all over the place. And probably one of the best optimization techniques out there. That's all I got, and I've only got 3 minutes left. It took a bit long, but if there's any questions, make sure to shoot away. And otherwise, I'm done. A lot of stuff here.
That was great.
Thanks, mate. Duplicate meshes. Does CK support static mesh instancing? I don't know, honestly. normal talk. Any questions in here? For the ceiling, would a way for optimization be making a surface and then adding normal maps to it with textures instead of all those assets? I don't know, but generally within a project, you don't want to have to make a unique version with normal maps for a ceiling piece for one dungeon. It's just not going to work. It's a lot of extra work, so you would just use normal optimization techniques to just make sure you don't have to worry about that. Anything else? Anything else? I think that's all. Are those culling regions strictly axis aligned? Yes, good point. I'll quickly go. I completely forgot about this. If you press T, you can view something from top down. Then press 0, you get a crazy, weird, perspectiveless view, which really fucks with my brain. And you can use this to see if the boxes are aligned. You can see they're perfectly aligned, they're connected. And if I disconnect this one, you'll see that there's like a little gap between. So you can use that view, shortcut is on 0, to see if stuff is connected. Because again, in perspective, it can be really annoying to align those two things. And with that turned off, you don't have to worry about that at all. That's a nice little tip. The portals only work when they're connected like that, so that's an important thing. And I think that's all. And yes, what OpusGlass said is exactly true. You can use fewer rocks with upscaling, which then saves stuff. All right, well, I think that's all from me. Done exactly on time, it seems. What, so who's next? Was it you?